Have you ever felt like the weight of the world is crushing you? Like no one sees your pain, and every tear you cry goes unnoticed? What if I told you that the one who created the universe sees every moment of your struggle, hears every silent cry, and already holds the solution in his hands? When you step into the cold shock of this message, it has to feel like someone just opened a window into the part of your soul you've been trying to hide. Because the truth is, there are seasons of life where the weight you carry becomes so heavy that even breathing feels like work. You wake up with the same questions you went to sleep with, the same ache in your chest, the same silent fear that maybe things won't change. You smile in public, but it's thin. You function, but it's forced. People around you see your strength, but God sees the cost of that strength. He sees the nights you lay awake, replaying conversations, rethinking decisions, questioning whether you did something wrong to deserve the storm you're in. He sees every moment you had to hold back tears because you didn't want anyone else to worry. You've mastered the art of appearing fine while feeling like you're falling apart inside. And right now, in this very moment, it might feel like your life is a collection of unanswered prayers, unhealed wounds, and unfinished battles. That is why the cold shock is necessary, because sometimes you need to hear a truth that hits you so hard it wakes up the part of you that's been drowning in silence. And the truth is this: the battle you're fighting is bigger than you. The pain you're carrying is deeper than what people see. The exhaustion you feel isn't weakness, it's the result of fighting for too long with too little support. You haven't broken down because you're unstable. You've broken down because you've been strong for too long. You've been holding everything together while everything inside you has been coming apart. You've been smiling for people who would never survive what you've lived through. You've been giving your best while receiving the least. You've been carrying responsibilities that should have crushed you months ago. And yet here you are, still trying, still hoping, still praying, still pushing. But here's the shock that snaps your attention. What if the very thing hurting you right now is the very thing God intends to use to shift you into the next chapter of your life? What if the pain is not punishment, but positioning? What if the heartbreak is not rejection, but redirection? What if the delay is not denial, but divine timing protecting you from something you don't see? What if the nights you cried were the nights heaven moved the most? What if the storm isn't there to drown you, but to wash away the things that were silently destroying you? What if the weight you're carrying isn't evidence of God's absence, but the sign that He's about to intervene? You've been asking for answers, but God has been preparing a breakthrough. You've been asking for clarity, but God has been building strength. You've been asking for relief, but God has been teaching endurance. And while you feel unseen, unheard, and overwhelmed, God is watching every tear, counting every breath, listening to every whisper of your heart. He knows the pain you don't talk about. He knows the questions you're afraid to ask. He knows the moments when your faith feels thin and your hope feels tired. Nothing you felt is invisible to Him. Nothing you face is being ignored by Him. Nothing you've endured is wasted with Him. The cold shock comes from realizing that even though you feel forgotten by people, you are remembered by God. Even though you feel empty, God sees capacity. Even though you feel broken, God sees rebuilding. Even though you feel like your strength is ending, God sees a beginning forming right there in the place that hurts the most. When you enter the tease and payoff stage of this message, the intention is to draw you closer to a truth you may have forgotten. God has been moving behind the scenes long before you ever felt the weight of your struggle. This moment isn't about giving you a cliche reassurance. It's about gently pulling you into the realization that what you're walking through has a divine purpose that your pain hasn't allowed you to see yet. When someone says, "Stay with me," it's not because the moment is casual, it's because a revelation is about to be placed in the exact space where your heart feels most fragile. And that's what this segment is designed to do. Create a holy pause, a sacred anticipation, a sense that something is about to be understood in a way you've never understood it before. There are times in life when your suffering feels too random to be meaningful. You replay the delays that disappointed you, the relationships that wounded you, the prayers that seemed to echo back in silence. You wonder why nothing changed when you begged God to step in. And it's in these moments of confusion where the tease comes in, not as manipulation, but as a gentle nudge from heaven that says, don't walk away yet. You're about to see what I was doing with the pieces you didn't understand. God sometimes allows you to reach a point where your strength is depleted, because only then can you truly witness His. You cannot see a miracle while you're still convinced you can fix everything yourself. And that is why the delay exists, not to torture you, but to prepare you for something that would have overwhelmed you had it come too soon. The payoff begins when you realize that God has been aligning details that you couldn't see because you were too close to the situation. You saw heartbreak, He saw protection. You saw a closed door, He saw a trap you avoided. You saw a long waiting season, He saw growth you needed before elevation. And the most profound thing is that God never reveals everything all at once. He lets you walk through shadows just long enough to recognize the value of the light when it finally breaks through. The payoff is recognizing that the pain didn't destroy you. It shaped you. It deepened your discernment, strengthened your spirit, and prepared you to carry blessings that require maturity, humility, and resilience. The tease whispers, stay with me. But the payoff reveals, now you see why. You begin to understand that every time you cried, heaven heard you. Every time you felt alone, God stood closer than your breath. Every time you questioned your worth, God affirmed it in ways you didn't even notice. There were nights when you thought nothing was changing, but heaven was rearranging things you didn't even know were in the way. The answers you thought were delayed were actually being perfected. The help you thought was absent was working quietly. The breakthrough you thought was forgotten was being shaped in detail, designed in precision, prepared in love. The beauty of this moment is that your pain becomes the doorway through which God introduces you to His plan. The confusion becomes the canvas where God paints clarity. The exhaustion becomes the place where God pours strength. And suddenly the tease and payoff don't feel like separate stages. They feel like two halves of the same promise. God didn't forget you. God isn't ignoring you. God hasn't abandoned the prayers you've been praying in secret. He's simply been waiting for the perfect moment to reveal what He has been preparing for you all along. When life becomes unbearable, when the weight of your struggles seems impossible to lift, and the pain you feel inside is so deep that no one around you truly understands, it is in these moments that the concept of leaving everything in God's hands becomes not just comforting, but essential. Many people spend their lives trying to control situations, people, and outcomes, believing that their own efforts alone can bring peace or solutions. Yet despite their tireless attempts, they often find themselves exhausted, frustrated, and still in the same place of despair. This struggle is a universal human experience, but it is also an invitation to trust in something greater than ourselves, to leave your pain, your failures, your disappointments, and even your fears in God's hands, is to acknowledge that you are not meant to carry the weight of the world alone, and that there is a divine presence who sees every tear, hears every silent cry, and understands every hidden hurt. It requires a humility and surrender that many find difficult, because our natural instinct is to fight, to plan, and to control. But the spiritual principle here is that God's wisdom far surpasses human understanding. There is a reassurance in knowing that you are not forgotten in your suffering, that each struggle has a purpose in the greater tapestry of your life, and that the pain you feel today is not overlooked by the one who created you. Faith does not mean that hardship will disappear instantly. It means that amidst the hardship, there is a steady hand guiding you, a presence that offers peace when everything else feels chaotic, and a light that penetrates even the darkest of nights. To truly leave it in God's hands is to trust that even when you cannot see the path ahead, there is a plan unfolding for your good, for your growth, and for your ultimate peace. It is in this surrender that the burden begins to lift, because you no longer rely solely on your strength or understanding, which are limited and often flawed, but instead rely on a source of infinite power, love, and wisdom. As you release control, you allow God's perspective to shape your outlook. And this shift brings a sense of freedom that is impossible to achieve through mere human effort. The practice of turning your pain over to God is not a passive act. It is an active decision to place your trust in the one who has never failed, to communicate honestly through prayer, and to open your heart fully to divine guidance. When your heart is heavy with grief, disappointment, or anxiety, prayer becomes the lifeline that connects you to God's understanding. It is in the quiet moments of reflection, in the honest admission of your fears and frustrations, that you begin to experience the peace that surpasses human reasoning. The beauty of this process is that it does not require you to have all the answers, to fix all the problems, or to understand every circumstance. It simply requires a willingness to let go, to allow God to take the wheel, and to trust that the outcomes, though sometimes unexpected, are always for your ultimate benefit. In doing so, you cultivate patience, resilience, and a deeper sense of hope. Your tears are never wasted, your cries are never ignored, and your pain becomes a medium through which you grow closer to a God who sees, hears, and redeems. By leaving it in God's hands, you acknowledge that you are human, that you are limited, and that true peace comes not from controlling your life, but from trusting the one who already holds it in his perfect care. There comes a time in every person's life when the challenges we face feel overwhelming, when the disappointments pile up, and when the pain seems endless. During these seasons, it is natural to feel powerless, to search desperately for solutions, and to wrestle with feelings of frustration and helplessness. Yet, in the midst of this struggle, there lies a profound truth. The act of leaving our burdens in God's hands is not a surrender of responsibility, but a transfer of trust to one who is infinitely capable. Life often teaches us that control is an illusion, and no matter how much we plan or strategize, there are events and circumstances that lie far beyond our reach. When we hold on to the illusion that we must fix everything ourselves, we carry a weight that was never meant to be ours alone. And this weight can manifest as anxiety, stress, and even despair. God, in his wisdom, invites us to release this burden, to recognize our limitations, and to allow his guidance to direct the course of our lives. To leave it in God's hands is to acknowledge that his understanding far surpasses our own, that his timing is perfect, and that his solutions may look different from what we imagine, but are always for our ultimate good. In trusting him, we learn to let go of the need to control outcomes, and instead we open ourselves to divine intervention, which often comes in ways we do not expect. This trust does not eliminate challenges, nor does it prevent pain from entering our lives, but it transforms the way we experience hardship. When we hand over our fears, frustrations, and unmet desires to God, we create space for peace to enter our hearts, for clarity to illuminate our decisions, and for hope to replace despair. Faith in God allows us to walk through life's trials with a sense of calm, knowing that nothing escapes his notice and that every tear we shed is seen and valued. It also fosters resilience, because when we trust that God is in control, setbacks are no longer final. They become opportunities for growth, lessons in perseverance, and reminders of the strength that emerges when we rely on divine support rather than solely on our own strength. Moreover, leaving our burdens in God's hands nurtures humility and patience, as we learn that some answers unfold gradually, that healing takes time, and that the process of transformation is often more important than the immediate resolution of our problems. Prayer and reflection serve as the bridge in this process, connecting our hearts to God's presence, allowing us to express our pain honestly and to seek His guidance with sincerity and openness. Through this connection, we gain the courage to face uncertainty, the wisdom to discern the right path, and the assurance that we are not alone in our struggles. Ultimately, the act of leaving our lives in God's hands is a declaration of trust, an acknowledgement that while we may not have the power to change every circumstance, there is a loving and all-knowing God who sees our struggles, hears our cries, and works tirelessly on our behalf. It is a conscious choice to step back from our frantic efforts to control everything and to embrace the peace and security that comes from knowing that our lives are held by a power greater than our own, a presence that is always faithful, compassionate, and wise in guiding us through the storms of life has a way of testing our endurance, challenging our patience, and placing us in situations that seem far beyond our ability to manage. It is during these intense moments of struggle, when pain and sorrow press heavily upon our hearts, that the concept of leaving everything in God's hands reveals its true power. Many people wrestle with the desire to fix all their problems immediately, to understand every circumstance and to control outcomes. Yet this constant striving often leads to frustration, exhaustion, and disappointment. The wisdom in leaving our struggles to God is that it allows us to surrender the impossible burden of complete control, recognizing that there is a divine presence whose understanding surpasses human reasoning, whose compassion knows no bounds, and whose guidance is perfectly timed. Trusting God with our pain does not mean passivity or inaction. It means making a conscious decision to stop relying solely on our own strength and to allow a higher power to work in ways that are unseen, yet profoundly effective. In moments of heartbreak, loss, or uncertainty, prayer becomes a lifeline, a direct line of communication with God where we can pour out our hearts, confess our fears, and ask for guidance with honesty and vulnerability. It is through this act of prayer and surrender that we begin to experience a transformation in perspective, seeing challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for growth, refinement, and deeper connection with God. The process of leaving our lives in God's hands cultivates patience, resilience, and inner peace, because it teaches us that some answers and solutions unfold in their own time and according to a plan that is greater than our own. By releasing the need to control every detail, we are free to focus on what we can do in the present while trusting that God will orchestrate the outcomes in ways that serve our ultimate good. This trust also alleviates the emotional burden we carry, reducing anxiety, stress, and the feeling of being alone in our struggles, because we know that each tear is seen, each cry is heard, and every act of faith is valued. Leaving our burdens in God's hands requires courage, humility, and a willingness to let go of our attachments to specific outcomes. But it also offers an unparalleled sense of freedom. It is an acknowledgement that while we are limited in our understanding and abilities, there is a divine intelligence at work, shaping circumstances for our benefit, even when we cannot see the full picture. Furthermore, this act of surrender strengthens our spiritual resilience, deepening our faith and teaching us that peace is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of God's guidance and comfort in the midst of it. When we entrust our struggles to God, we open ourselves to His wisdom, protection, and provision, allowing His presence to guide our decisions, heal our hearts, and restore our hope. Life's storms may continue, challenges may persist, but the awareness that God is holding our lives, seeing our pain, and hearing our cries provides an enduring source of strength, encouragement, and reassurance that we are never truly alone in our journey there. Are times in life when everything seems to be falling apart, when circumstances feel beyond repair, and when our hearts are burdened with sorrow, fear, or confusion. It is in these moments that the idea of leaving everything in God's hands becomes not only comforting, but transformational, because it shifts the focus from human limitation to divine power. Many people attempt to carry the weight of their struggles alone, striving to fix situations, control outcomes, and make sense of events that are often beyond understanding. This relentless effort can leave a person feeling exhausted, defeated, and disconnected from a deeper sense of purpose or peace. Yet, when we choose to surrender our worries, our fears, and our pain to God, we open the door to a presence that sees what we cannot see, knows what we do not know, and works for our good in ways that surpass our imagination. To leave it in God's hands is to trust that even when we do not understand the timing, the methods, or the reasons behind certain experiences, there is a loving plan unfolding, and every trial or challenge has a purpose in shaping our character, strengthening our faith, and guiding us toward a life of greater fulfillment. This act of surrender requires humility because it asks us to admit that we cannot do everything on our own. And it requires courage because letting go of control is often counterintuitive to human nature. Prayer becomes a critical tool in this process, allowing us to communicate openly with God, express our deepest fears and frustrations, and seek guidance with honesty and vulnerability. Through consistent prayer and reflection, we develop a sense of intimacy with God, and our hearts begin to trust His wisdom and timing, even when circumstances seem confusing or painful. Leaving life in God's hands also cultivates patience, because it teaches us that answers and resolutions often unfold gradually, and that the process of waiting and trusting is itself a form of growth. It helps us to see that hardships are not arbitrary or meaningless, but rather opportunities for transformation, moments that test and refine our resilience, and experiences that draw us closer to a divine understanding of life and purpose. Furthermore, trusting God with our struggles alleviates the mental and emotional burden of trying to solve everything ourselves, replacing anxiety with peace, despair with hope, and isolation with the assurance that we are never truly alone. It also encourages us to focus on what we can do in the present moment while relying on God to manage outcomes that are beyond our control. By choosing to let go, we experience a liberation from the constant pressure to force solutions, and we embrace a life guided by divine wisdom, patience, and love. This surrender transforms the way we face difficulties, allowing us to respond with faith rather than fear, with resilience rather than despair, and with hope rather than hopelessness. Ultimately, leaving it in God's hands is an act of faith, trust, and surrender that strengthens our spirit, nurtures our soul, and provides a steadfast foundation upon which we can navigate life's inevitable challenges, secure in the knowledge that God sees our pain, hears our cries, and works tirelessly for our ultimate good.